Alright guys, welcome back to Formula 1 news. The US Grand Prix in Texas is this weekend and many new upgrades teams are bringing to try and help their position in the championship from now to the end of the season. Haas are bringing major changes to their sidepods, look rather Red Bull-esque, Aston Martin as well, but also Mercedes with a brand new floor, what they say is their most significant update from now to the end of the year. James Allison says only on paper a tenth of a second improvement, but Toto Wolff seems to believe that if it does improve the driver's confidence in the car, the actual performance gain could be quite more significant than that. Very much intrigued to your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always, I greatly appreciate it. Loads of things to say. Danny Ric is back in the saddle this weekend, and as you can see, a bit of a shambles I got to say from the preparation guys over at the US Grand Prix this weekend, because this is not how you spell Daniel Ricciardo's name. Sure, car, it actually, to be honest, when you try and spell Ricciardo, this is what you think it's spelled like, but it's not. It's Ricciardo with an I before the A, so they got that wrong. Probably have to change that one, but he is back in the seat this weekend, and as he says, he was on the simulator doing some work and he reckons that he's basically good to go again and is 100% fit and healthy. This was also noted, and probably a mistake, but let me know what you guys think in the comments below. There was this kind of poster put up really, all the drivers we can see, Danny Ric's on here, Hamilton, Verstappen, etc, you guys know the vibe. But on the left-hand side, this is not Lance Stroll, this is Felipe Drugovich, right? The reserve for Aston Martin. So why? It's, probably a mistake, but let's be honest, it's a rather interesting mistake to make, is it not, on a weekend where Stroll has been, he's been struggling over the last few races. There's massive questions about Stroll's commitment, his motivation, whether Danny Stroll wants to kick him out of the team, and then they turn out and these posters have Drugovich on, not Stroll, because Alonso's here. Now, as we see, they then realised their error and took this down. I don't know if they've actually replaced this with a picture of Stroll, or whether it's now just blank where Stroll should be, so maybe there's still something in this, but intrigued to your thoughts in the comments, because yeah, if there was any driver they could have accidentally missed off here or put someone else on in their place, that's an interesting one for them to miss. I don't think there's anything to it, but I guess stay tuned. Now, teams are bringing changes not just to their cars, but also to the liveries. This is going to be the Red Bull livery this weekend. Some people think this looks disgusting. Some people kind of like it. Whatever. The car's going to be a rocket ship, I'm sure, regardless. And to be fair, the one thing I did like that I saw, especially for this weekend, was this from Joe Granu. I don't usually mention special helmets and stuff because I kind of get tired of all the changes they make, but this is absolute fire as far as I'm concerned, what Joe's going to be wearing this weekend. So yeah, looking forward to seeing that in the car. And we'll see if Alfa Romeo can keep up their performances, because last weekend in Qatar, they seemed to take a step. Both drivers in the points, both impressive drives from the respective guys. Again, Perez, not a great drive last weekend, and we do have an update here on what is believed to be going on with Sergio Perez. Christian Horner, as you'd expect, says, there's nothing going on, guys, don't worry about it. So we may be at the Christian Horner denies the rumour stage of the rumour eventually being confirmed to be true. But he did talk about Checo and say that, we know what he's capable of. Qualifying tends to be his weakness. He's grinding out in the simulator. I'm pretty sure he said that he's been, cooking up in the sim. Yeah, here we go. Working on the sim for 3 days last week. He's not done that previously, trying to get to the bottom of his issues. And then said that there is no ultimatum in place such that he has to achieve seconds to maintain his spot. Does this mean, oh, good idea, guys, let's think about that. Does this mean that they've already made that decision and therefore there is no ultimatum because they've already decided that Perez is going to go? To be honest, the idea that his seat is tied to seconds is, to me, like, not a good idea anyway, because he might get seconds this year because Hamilton's car keeps blowing up and he gets a load of DNFs, even if Perez performs terribly. Or Perez might get thirds, but he's leading 5 races and then his car breaks down. I don't know, right? You've got to put it into perspective. That second in the championship position doesn't tell the entire story, and if Perez finishes second by a point, that might not be impressive, or that might be really quite impressive depending on how these final few races go. Really what he's got to do, get to Q3 at the minimum, and then, get some podiums. At least a good few podiums would be good. But I think it's quite possible that Red Bull have already made their decision on this. And sure, Horner's going to say what he says. I don't fully buy it, especially when Motorsport Italy. And as I said yesterday, when the German press say something, you've got to say, all right, the Germans are talking about it. It's probably true. When the Italians are talking about it, you've got to think, well, all right, let's, generally the Italian press is considered to use things a little bit more loosely than the German press might. But Motorsport Italy do report that there is an ultimatum, but it's not a P2 ultimatum. It's rather do well for the next 5 races or Ricciardo's going to replace you. And look, let's be honest here. If Red Bull are already looking at Ricciardo as a potential replacement, someone has probably already made that decision. And, well, there's even these rumours that were going on that next year, both Ricciardo and Perez could, share the Red Bull next season. I don't really buy that's going to be the case. I think they're going to make a decision, and whether that decision's been made already, I don't know. But stay tuned, because this weekend, if Perez has another hard time, and to be honest, a sprint weekend is probably not what Perez needs right now. Ideally, he would probably have 3 good hours of practice to warm up. But no, it's going to be 1 hour of practice straight into quali, which is probably not what Perez needs at the moment, especially if Ricciardo has a good weekend on his comeback weekends. Now, let's talk about the upgrades this weekend. This is what Albert Fabrega says is going to be the rankings of the cars. Now, I have a kind of hard time believing this is going to be true. Actually, I have a very hard time believing this is true. And I don't really know what the correlation is between the supposed simulator that analyzes this and the real race pace. But the simulator says that from first to last, there's going to be a 1.5 seconds delta between the Red Bull and the Williams. It's going to be Red Bull, McLaren, Ferrari, Mercedes, AlphaTauri apparently are going to have the 5th fastest car, then Alfa Romeo, then Alpine, then Haas, then Aston 9th. I don't know. I guess we'll see whether this simulator's got no idea what it's talking about. But then again, there will be upgrades here, right? And this is what he says. This doesn't include upgrades. So, yeah, I have a hard time believing that the current Aston is going to be the 9th fastest car around here, slower than the Haas. But I guess we'll see. There's no doubt that AlphaTauri have made a step recently and will continue to do so, it seems. And potentially the same with Alfa Romeo. So if this was the order, it would actually make things really rather interesting, especially if it's competitive up the front. Now, Haas, P8, but this is, of course, not considering their upgrades they're bringing. And this is the big one, right? This is what they need to work. Günther Steiner has said, these upgrades have to deliver, and if they do not, they're basically screwed. They've put a lot of time and resources into developing their car in this direction. If it doesn't deliver them the performance gains they want, they will have wasted a lot of time and money off the budget cap. This is the old livery and side pods. This is the updated livery for this weekend as they try and prove they are the American team. There is no need at all for any other American team, such as Andretti on the grid, because Haas, we've got it covered for the American fans. Not really sure they do, but they're going to try their best to sell that story with this livery this weekend. I think Williams are doing the same, actually. They've also got a nice American, star-spangled banner-inspired side pod, livery design, basically, because I guess they're owned by Doralton Capital or whatever, which are probably an American firm, so you guys know how it is. But this is the new updated side pod. Can't see much from this angle. This is a better angle of it, because if you look at this, you can see that it's Red Bull-esque, and it's also kind of Aston Martin-esque as well, I would say, with the what they like to call the water slide on the top of the side pod that goes down to the back, and also the undercut here is way more pronounced on this side pod than it was on the previous Haas version. So yeah, quite clear. They're taking the Red Bull direction, something of an Aston Martin direction as well, but primarily Red Bull, and it's going to need to deliver. Steiner said that outright, that these are the big changes to their side pods and to the floor. Now, the side pods you can see, the floor you can't necessarily see. Unless someone crashes, then you get to have a look at it. And this is what Mercedes are looking to change. We'll see that in a second. Now, Aston Martin as well, they have taken many steps back over the last several races. It's not like their upgrades haven't... it's not that their upgrades have made them slower, but they just haven't improved the car really at all. The car is probably about the same speed now as it was at the start of the season, which, maybe a little bit faster with some changes, but fundamentally, it's not great, and everyone else really has caught up and overtaken them, which is not ideal, especially for Stroll, because he was struggling to score points at the best of times, let alone now, when even Alonso is, struggling to get points every single weekend. We'll see what happens in the sprint, of course, but this is going to be a crucial upgrade package. They clearly recognized, I think it was really Canada, they brought the upgrade there and it didn't really work as intended. I think it looked like they were quite good that weekend, but just because their car suited that circuit, the reality was that direction of the upgrade wasn't the correct one. They're going to have to take some steps back in order to take some steps forwards, and the intention is to not just find performance, but also to show that they're moving in the right direction. And that is the key thing that Mercedes know full well as well, that it's not really about performance at the moment. It's about ensuring that the car is well set up going into next year. But of course, that is in part about performance. If you bring a new part to the car that does what you want it to do for next year, it's probably going to be a faster part on the car. Hamilton, Russell, they've all been at the factory dedicating time. As James Allison says, the drivers have been good enough to put aside time for us in slightly cooler environment of home. That has proved useful. It's proved helpful for ranking the problems they have, for seeing the opportunities and just making sure that the things we're working on are well aligned with what they are describing. So then we get to Toto Wolff's analysis on the upgrade this weekend. As he says, this is a modified floor. This has been talked about for some time from Mercedes, and this was really rumoured to be the big Mercedes upgrade from now to the end of the year. Same thing last year in Austin. I think it was a new floor last year, wasn't it, they brought to this Grand Prix, and it definitely seemed to help. Were they as fast as Red Bull? No, but did they become pretty much the second fastest car from that point to the end of the season? Yes, and it did help them win a race. Let's not forget in Brazil, with the upgrade they brought in Austin, they dialed it in over the next couple of races, and it helped them win quite comfortably when they got to Interlagos. So, as Toto Wolff says, they are still bringing more upgrades. I think there will be new things on the car because they think that it's going to help with their understanding for the W15, but this is the final significant update. Now, he reckons it will bring a small gain, but more importantly, it's another milestone in setting our development path for the W15. Now, it also will help win the battle for second in the constructors. You'd think they should be okay for it because Ferrari are still a little bit hit or miss. But yeah, the fact that Mercedes are getting embarrassed by McLaren is their real problem right now. But it also might well help Hamilton get P2 off Perez in the drivers, which Daniel Ricciardo fans will be very much supporting to be the case. So James Allison himself said this floor is worth about 1/10 of a second. So he doesn't reckon that it's going to be 2, 3, half a second, a whole second like what McLaren have knocked off this season. That's not going to happen. But it's going to be, you know, substantial enough. To be honest, I think Mercedes are now erring on the side of, let's say, not exactly pessimism, but I think they're being slightly more cautious than they have been previously. I would say for the last couple of years, ever since they didn't really come out the gate swinging in 2022. And to be honest, even when they didn't, there was still talk that, oh, well, these zero pods, they've got the potential there. It's just a matter of time. And Mercedes were constantly gassing up, oh, these upgrades are going to do this, and it's going to be a massive change. We're really finding great performance here. And nothing really happens, to be honest, over the last couple of years, to the extent that McLaren are now embarrassing them week in and week out. So I think they're probably going to be a little bit more cautious now in what they say, not say, oh, this is going to be, it's going to change our season, we're going to be winning races again, because I think a lot of Mercedes fans are pretty fed up of hearing that, and then nothing actually ends up happening. But what I do wonder is that whether, okay, sure, 1/10 of a second, but Toto Wolff has said the big problem with the W14 is the lack of confidence, especially in the rear ends, and if the floor helps with that, or just helps with the driver confidence in general, the belief is that there's more performance in the W14 than is seen by the lap times. The theory is that, you know, you see this especially in race trim with Hamilton, but, you know, when he gets a little bit more comfortable with the car in those settings, it's actually pretty fast. And the belief is that there's more time, there's more tenths of a second in that car if the drivers were comfortable with the car. So, you know, there's a chance that if the floor maybe gives 1/10 of a second lap time, but it gives 1/10 of a second confidence, I don't know, and then that might be a quite significant step. Now, you've also got to consider this was a pretty good track for Mercedes last year. They could have won this race. Verstappen, of course, had that bad pit stop, came out behind Hamilton, and then decided to actually put his foot down and was rapid from then to the end of the Grand Prix and still won the race anyway. You guys probably remember after this overtake happened, well, actually just before this overtake happens, Verstappen was 9/10 behind at the start of the straight, and by the end of the straight, he was ahead. So, you know, that Red Bull straight line speed and DRS was absurd, especially last year, but the Mercedes was quite good around here. It's a circuit that on paper suits the car reasonably well. It is a little bit bumpy, so I guess that's something to be watching out for, but yeah, it should be an okay weekend for Mercedes. Last year, of course, though, it was Red Bull, kind of Ferrari a little bit was something of a challenge, and then, of course, Mercedes. But this year, there's, you know, the McLarens are in play. Obviously, Ricciardo had a bit of a bad one last year. Norris was here. Alonso, you guys probably remember last year had that crash with Stroll, and somehow his car survived, and he got back to P6, which was incredible. And then he got demoted, didn't didn't he, for some penalty, and then he was reinstated. All sorts were going on. And of course, my favourite part of this race was Tim Cook waving the flag like he didn't want to be there. So the other part, though, of course, of all this upgrade stuff is that Ferrari will not really be doing anything. They're just focusing on next year's car now and are not going to make really any changes at all to the SF23 from now to the end of the season. So definitely opens the door, if Mercedes upgrade works as intended, for them to solidify P2. And Red Bull, to be honest, are in the Ferrari category. They're not going to be bringing much more. Their car's going to be what it is. They want to ensure that there's absolutely no cost for their, testing time penalty they received for going over the budget gap in 2021. So they've, a long time ago now, probably before anybody else, switched their developments to the 2024 car. Ferrari have now done the same. Mercedes is still pursuing some new ideas, but it definitely does give the opportunity for, at some point in these final 5 races, for Red Bull to either be beaten again. And if Red Bull are to be beaten again, it's probably not going to be by Ferrari. I would say it's more likely to be either McLaren or, of course, Mercedes. Very much intrigued to your thoughts in the comments below. Speaking of McLaren and Mercedes, just one final one. It is Russell and Norris's 100th Grand Prix weekends this weekend. I guess Albon would have been here as well, but of course he had to take some time away after the Red Bull saga. And to be honest, these drivers have very similar records. If you look at their average finishing position, if you look at their number of podiums, number of wins, of course, for Russell is 1 and it's 0 for Norris, but number of podiums, stuff like this, actually really rather similar in terms of their career so far. And an exciting little intra-friendship battle that will continue on. So very much intrigued to your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, take care, and I'll see you next time.